Alright, it's been a couple days on the YJ project. We are up in the air with this now. We had gotten the roll cage out. So, in cleaning up under here, running a tap through these body bolts. The back ones both spun inside. We ended up with having to take these plates out. These are the plates. One side is perfectly clean, the other side is all rusted. So we ended up having to cut pockets open, bend them open. You probably can't see up inside there. The surprising thing here is, let me see if I can get a light. The surprising thing with this is, there we go. It's actually not that bad in there. There's a little tiny bit of surface rust, which I'll treat. But the bottom part here is not rusted out inside on either side. You just got a little bit of surface rust. The only thing it looks like rusted out was the, there's a sheet metal cage that gets welded over top of these. And I guess the sheet metal cage rusted away. They want these to be a little bit movable, just for assembly purposes. All this blue paint under here, it's just rattle can rust paint that we have. These are all places where there was maybe a little bit of surface rust or something. I cleaned it, went over it with the rust killer, and then we just went over it with some paint we had laying around. It's actually not that bad under here, surprisingly. This is all seam sealer and there's undercoat and everything. I'm gonna re-undercoat this. The worst part actually is right here, and this is where there was a big heat shield above the muffler. This heat shield was there. Above that heat shield, this hat channel was very rusty. So we cleaned that as best we could, blew it all out. Like I said, there's a lot of blue paint. It would make you think that, oh my God, there was a lot of rust. A lot of it was just very light surface rust, and I'm just being a little OCD about it. The same up here. We got this all cleaned up. It's all cut in the rest of the way on the bottom. We got these pockets up in here. We got them cleaned. Got some paint up in there on both sides. These are where your front body mounts are. Now this body mount here, that's a different color blue. This one, there was the body mount bolt was cut off and sticking out a couple inches. We tried fixing it without doing anything else. Oh, really fast. This Jeep has never been repainted. That's how good the factory paint job was on this particular red Jeep. That is just hilarious. They didn't even bother to paint the bottom of the hinges or anything like that. The whole bottom of the tub here in the back. So, I'm going to pause for a second, let the Jeep down, show you what we're dealing with up top. Okay, we are back. So, this is what we're dealing with up here. This is that one mount where it would not come out. So, we ended up having to cut a flap in the floor, bend it forward. And the cage was actually intact. But, I guess this was just so rusted that when the guy tried breaking it loose, either he somehow spun it inside the cage, or maybe he used an impact gun. You really should not use an impact gun to break stuff like this loose, because it's just a sheet metal cage, and that impact gun is working that square nut against the sheet metal, and over and over and over and over until it just digs itself a round spot inside the cage and starts spinning. Honestly, there is no real way that I know of fixing these things other than cutting it open like we just did. And what we're going to end up doing is when we bolt the body down, we're probably going to end up, we'll just reuse what's here for the front, reuse the back ones. Once the body's set where it's permanently going to be, this front one, I'll just bend the flap shut, I'll weld it, address the welds. This is going to get bed liner anyway. The ones in the back, I should be able to still bend them closed, but I'll probably just end up gluing them basically. I'll bend the flaps back closed and I'll use some Right Stuff or something like that on there. Put something like this on there. You know, smear it on there good and thick around the seam. That'll seal it good. That stuff, once that hardens, it's near impossible to get apart again. There's a couple spots I'm going to have to address. We've got a little rust through here where the seam sealer is. This has been treated on both sides now and painted on both sides. So we may just fill that back in with seam sealer again. This needs to be cleaned up. Somebody just punched a random hole straight through the body there for God knows what. Something like that. We're either going to just fill the hole with some adhesive maybe, or just put a small piece of tape over it, because we're going to, again, the bed liner is going to cover right over that. You won't even know it was ever there. There's another one over there where they did the same thing over there on the floor, right there. This in the back, I'm going to probably have to cut a square patch there, and I'll weld in a little square patch, get that dressed. This is going to have to get fixed up here. It's an odd spot for rust. So the other body's fine there. I may just cut that off the other body since it's kind of a complicated little shape. These over here where the little piece of fender flare was on here, I ended up having to cut both the rib nuts off. So I'm gonna have to put a new rib nut in here, new rib nut in here. The driver's seat, 2 of the rib nuts are gone to bolt the seat down. This front corner here and that back corner there. So we're gonna have to see if rib nuts will go back in there again, or if it's just gonna be the way it is forever. So I mean, overall, other than that, the body's pretty solid. And we got up in the air, it looked pretty scary underneath until you started knocking off the flaky stuff that was just like flaking off paint with a little tiny bit of surface rust under it. Once you got all that off, it didn't look so bad. It looked pretty clean, other than, like I showed you, the worst part underneath really was the that one end of that hat channel, and that's because it had that heat shield above it. So I guess stuff just sat there, or it just never got properly painted or undercoated or anything on the assembly line, because that heat shield was in the way, and the heat shield got sprayed instead of the body. So that's where we are now. We are going to figure out what we're doing to undercoat this. Once I get the undercoat done, the rolling chassis sitting out there ready to drop this on. So hopefully the next day or so we're going to have this on and bolted down, and then we can start hooking everything up on the firewall, get the dash switched over, and get the steering column in, because none of that will be in the way of doing any body or paint work. It's not going to be in the way of me doing the bed liner work. So that is where we are.